So the first question is coming in around creatine, which is kind of my favorite supplement. In the Betty Body, I talked about kind of foundations, vitamin D, magnesium, better than diamonds. Still agree. I still have that as a major guiding principle for me when I'm thinking about supplementation. I'm actually not a big supplement person. I do tend to err on the minimalist side, like less is more, especially when I find that people are like, what's the one supplement that's going to help me with X? It's like, none of them. Have you seen some of the pathways in the body? That being said, big fan of creatine, especially when it comes to both men and women, but women seem to be afraid of creatine because of the sort of myths around water weight and water bloating. So I want to kind of do a really deep dive into creatine. So this question is, the official question is, what is your take on creatine for muscle building? This woman is 56. She's on hormone replacement therapy, postmenopausal. So just to kind of give you like a lay of the land, creatine is a combination of 3 different amino acids. All right. So it's glycine, arginine, and methionine. And this simple yet mighty compound is involved in many, many processes in the body. It is a fundamental component in how your body creates ATP. So this is the primary energy source for the myocyte or for the muscle cells. ATP, of course, stands for adenosine triphosphate, which means that there's 3 phosphate groups there. I'll come back to that in a minute. So when we are working our muscles intensely, right? So if there's an explosive, let's say a contraction, like you might be doing in a resistance training program, or, very brief, let's say intense work, lasting somewhere in the range of, call it, maybe 10 to 15, maybe no more than 15 seconds. Creatine is how the muscle creates the energy necessary to do it. Like prior to other sort of energy systems kicking in, we have this creatine system that will help to provide the myocyte with energy. Most of the creatine in our bodies are synthesized in the liver and the kidneys, but most of it's stored in the muscle tissue for that sort of brief, even 15 seconds is a bit much. I'm going to hack that down to 12. So like 10 to 12 seconds of like explosive activity is where we see that creatine becoming very, very important in terms of being able to help the muscle cell create energy. Now, creatine is not really considered an essential nutrient, meaning that the human form, the human body is we can create it endogenously. But of course, it can be obtained through the diet as well. So supplementation is one way. And then, of course, foods that contain animal products as well. So if you are someone who's a vegan or vegetarian, know that the only source that you really have is that endogenously produced one, or potentially supplementation with creatine. And that's often, when we're thinking about energy, particularly with my vegans and my vegetarians, this is a really important supplement for you to consider as well. Now, there are many forms of creatine. My favorite by a landslide is something called creatine monohydrate. It just has 1 molecule of water attached to it, hence the name monohydrate. And it's usually like somewhere between like 90, call it 90% creatine by weight. Okay. So as I mentioned before, the phosphate bonded form of creatine is like your body's first choice of energy before we get into oxidative phosphorylation and glycolysis. Like these actually take several seconds to sort of kick in. So this creatine system is the first line of defense, let's say, in getting your muscle tissue energy. And so you can, if you're someone who, eats animal products on a regular basis, you're probably getting enough creatine. If you're somebody who's thinking about performance, such as myself, I also supplement with creatine as well, because when you supplement with creatine monohydrate, this is going to serve to increase the creatine stores and the phosphocreatine availability, which is going to allow the muscle to create ATP at a faster rate. Said another way, the more phosphocreatine that you have via creatine supplementation, the more work that you can accomplish. So in the gym, let's say, or even, work in general, before fatigue is going to set in, because you have this sort of phosphocreatine system available to you for creating energy. The other reason why creatine is so important is that it draws water into the muscle cell. Okay. So it makes the myocyte, it makes the muscle cell more hydrated. Okay. So this is an important qualification here, because a lot of people think, oh, creatine makes you bloat. Incorrect. It doesn't make you bloat. It draws water inside the cell. Okay. So you are not bloated, but you are drawing muscle inside the cell. And a few things happen when a myocyte is hydrated, the most notable and most important being an increase in muscle protein synthesis. Your muscles do not make muscle protein in the absence of water when you are dehydrated. So this is certainly, creatine is going to help to keep the muscle cells hydrated. You also can do that by drinking more water. Okay. I can attest to, when I am regularly supplementing with creatine, my performance, of course, is better in the gym. So as I mentioned before, like I can do more work before that fatigue sets in. And at the risk of sounding like the cool cats, my muscles look more swole. That's SWOLE. Okay. So essentially what I'm saying is that my muscles actually look bigger and fuller, which is what you want. If you're somebody who is leaning into building a physique, you really want to be trying to improve, from an aesthetic perspective, it's going to look better. Your muscles are not going to look flat. They're going to look nice and full. So, for me, I would say that, there are a couple of major supplements that you should be considering to consume on a daily basis. The ones that I outline in the Betty Body, of course, are, vitamin D and magnesium. Potentially, if there's inflammation, we can look at turmeric or curcumin. And if you're somebody who's wanting to augment your performance in the gym, you definitely want to be thinking about creatine as well. So for my super nerds who want to know how this actually works, I've been kind of teasing a little bit about the phosphate piece. So after creatine enters the body, it's going to bind with a phosphate molecule and it's going to form creatine phosphate. Okay. So this is kind of where it gets a little technical. So hang on with me. I know you can stay with me. It's not that technical, but just for those of you that really want to know kind of the mechanism, I want to explain it fully so that you can really understand the value here. So I mentioned ATP, adenosine triphosphate, 3 phosphates, right? So when your body is using, let's say, carbohydrates or proteins or fats or whatever, doing its thing in order to produce ATP is it's like the energetic currency of the body. So when we have when this ATP is being created, in that process of using that energy for whatever reason, one of the phosphate groups is it's called hydrolyzed. So energy in that form of heat is given off. And then one phosphate essentially from that ATP is used up. So now we go from ATP, triphosphate, to diphosphate. We go to ADP, adenosine diphosphate. So now you have this free ADP molecule, right? Which is essentially useless. It's kind of junk unless you can kind of bind another phosphate to it, to sort of re-up it, let's say, to kind of chunk it back up, if you will, to ATP. And this is where the creatine comes in and becomes very, very important, where we can really augment your performance before that fatigue sets in. So what happens is the creatine is like, hey, I see that there's ADP here. I'm going to donate one of my phosphate groups so that ADP can kind of chunk up again to form that ATP. Okay. Okay. So the next thing that, so now we have a little bit of a mechanism, right? So creatine is going to be super generous, it's going to give its phosphate up so that ADP becomes ATP. So we're creating more energy locally, okay, without relying on other energetic systems, which is important. Now there's a couple of, the question here was like creatine for women. So I've been kind of explaining, yes, big fan, huge fan. The best time to take it, again, some dialogue in terms of when. I'm less concerned about exactly the right time to take it versus like just taking it. So you can take it pre-workout if you want. I tend to take it post-workout just because that's kind of when I'm feeding. Like I tend to work out fasted most of the time. And that was another question that I'm going to get to today as well. It's like, which is better, fasted workouts or fed workouts? But typically for my schedule, I would say 3 of the 5 days that I train, 3 of those days have to be done fasted, or else they're just not going to get done just by way of my schedule. So I typically work out fasted, don't really like food, just like a personal preference. I don't really like to have a lot of food especially if I'm working out in the morning. I don't like food first thing. And like, I just feel like a rock is in my stomach. So I like to work out early in the morning anyway, fasted. And then after the workout, I have some post-workout nutrition. So that usually includes a protein. There's like protein with some water, and I'll add some creatine into the water at that point. And then I might have some oats that I've soaked overnight, or, something like that, like some carbohydrate. I might have a banana in the shake, whatever it is, whatever carbohydrates I'm consuming post shake. So there's no perfect time to take it. You can take it pre-workout. It's going to give you the benefits. You can take it post-workout. I would postulate, I would pontificate that I actually like taking creatine, from a mechanistic perspective. I think after the workout, there are some benefits to that as well. One, if you're feeding, like you're having some carbohydrates, right? And you're like, maybe the bananas in your shake, or whatever, the oats that you're consuming, whatever it is, we have insulin naturally that's going to be available. And that helps to drive obviously substrate into the cells. That also includes creatine. So I think that it helps to get, I could be totally wrong here, but I feel like with the insulin present in that post nutrition, like that post workout nutrition, insulin is helping to drive creatine into the muscle cell. And I feel like your muscles are kind of hungry, especially if you've worked out fasted. They're just going to be a little bit hungrier and more adept at taking up nutrients for substrate for, reconfiguring and helping to heal the whole process. Okay. So typically a dosage here for, I don't think taking a creatine constantly is also a great idea, because it's not like our bodies are dumb. Like they know that we're supplementing with them. So I typically cycle, as I do most things, really. I typically cycle creatine. So you'll usually reach muscle saturation at about 30 or so days of like consistent, like if you're taking creatine every single day, you'll usually reach like saturation of the myocyte, or like we'll call it the musculoskeletal system as a whole, at about 30 days. So I will typically take creatine for like 2 cycles, so like 2 menstrual cycles, and then I take a break for 1 or 2 cycles again, and then it starts again. So I like to cycle things at, no surprise there. I like to cycle most things, and creatine is included in that as well. So I hope that gives you a bit more color in terms of like types of creatine. I don't have like any specific brand that I like. I do have an Amazon storefront that I will link in the show notes that has all like my post-workout nutrition, and it has a whole bunch of other stuff in there, like stuff that I like for my kitchen and skin products and all that. But you'll find the creatine that I use. I want to say it's BioSteel, but I can't recall off. It's honestly, as long as you find creatine monohydrate, that's the big thing that you want to be looking for on the label. So yes to creatine. If you are 56, you're on HRT, you're postmenopausal, absolutely. If you're 26 and in your cycle and you're going to be, you're looking to build a physique, it's good across the entire arc of life. The only thing to consider is kind of timing, I like to take it after, but again, you can take it beforehand, and then cycling it as well. So taking it consistently, I think that you'll start to see a bit of a habituation that tends to happen. So we want to downplay that a little bit by cycling it. So 2 cycles on, 2 cycles off is like an easy kind of way to remember it. And I will also just say that if it's not perfect, like if you cycle for like 1 and then take 2 months off because you forgot and then you get back on again, it's totally fine. As the name of the podcast suggests, we don't want to try to be perfect. We just want to try to get better. So if you're doing something, and you've messed up a time or you've messed up timing, like as long as it kind of gets in there, you're doing better. Okay. Hence, that's actually why I named the podcast Better, because I didn't want to play into my own tendencies to try and be perfect all the time and try to get everything right. Because when we think about all or nothing, the type A personalities that are listening, I know you, I see you, because you are me and I am you. In the face of all or nothing, what do we choose? We choose nothing, right? Because we're like, no, if I can't do it perfect, forget it. I'm not even like, throw the baby out with the bathwater. So don't worry about getting it perfect. Just start.